Control the language, shape the mind. Dictate the culture, keep the masses blind. The party's hand, it moves unseen, altering words, reshaping the scene. They twist the truth, they bend the light, crafting their narrative out of sight. Every term they redefine to serve their purpose, to toe their line. Everything means capitalism. In their parallel tongue, it's their prism, whispered in socialist code. The truth obscured, the meanings erode. From bourgeoisie to equities, in their language weaves a twisted game. Each word a tool, each phrase a ploy, to quote the truth in their employ. Bourgeoisie oppressors they claim, equity's their utopia's name. Whiteness, racism, systemic fly, all roads lead back to their abolition fight. Fascism dubbed as free market stream, abolishing individual liberties, their scheme. Normativity, patriarchy's grip, all intertwined, their narrative flip. Everything means capitalism. In their parallel tongue, it's their prism, whispered in socialist code. The truth obscured, the meanings erode. From bourgeoisie to equities, in their language weaves a twisted game. Each word a tool, each phrase a ploy, to quote the truth in their employ. Queer and trans, they declare no war on capitalism's norm they're restore. Gender binary, the nuclear family's whole. Their destruction is the goal. Imperialism, colonization's reign. Decolonization to break the chain. The police, enforcers they're named, guardians of capital, their claim. Their language shapes, their rhetoric binds, to break the cycle, to free our minds. For in their words, their hidden game, capitalism's grip, they aim to tame. Everything means capitalism. In their parallel tongue, it's their prism, whispered in socialist code. The truth obscured, the meanings erode. From bourgeoisie to equities, in their language weaves a twisted game. Each word a tool, each phrase a ploy, to quote the truth in their employ. Control the language, control the crowd, but in our hearts the truth is loud. Their words may twist, their meanings bend, but in the end our voices ascend.
What up? Happy Friday. Welcome to Happy Hour, guys. We did it. We made it through another week, and now it's time for us to kick back, put up our feet, and have some beers as we watch a woke training from start to finish. And today, well, the Groypers are not going to be happy today. I'll tell you what. The Groypers are not going to be happy. And listen, man, I don't take any pleasure in showing the things I'm going to show today. But the fact of the matter is that we know that one of the things queer Marxists are doing is co-opting churches. They're co-opting like the Universalist churches. They're co-opting the Episcopalian churches. They're co-opting the Baptist churches. They're co-opting all the different churches. And that includes the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church. Now, I posted this presentation on Twitter the other day, and what I heard from the Groypers is That's not the real Catholic Church. And the response to that is, duh. That's the point. The point is that these people are not real Catholics. The point is that they are trying to subvert your institutions. That is the entire effing point. And I just don't know how you can look at and listen, man. Like the Pope has made some relatively conservative decisions lately, and so the Groypers they think they're safe. They're like, the Pope is on our side, really? Like, okay, well. I mean, did you look at the policies that the Pope put in place last year? Because the way that queer Marxists co-opt institution, it's through subtle little policy shifts that take place over time that you just dismiss when they happen because it's just one little minor thing and it's not really that big a deal. And then there's another little minor thing and it's not really that big a deal. And then there's another one and another one and another one and another one and another one. And this is how it rolls. This is what the long march through the institutions looks like, where it is a battle of inches, bit by bit by bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And so today for happy hour, we are going to be listening to a presentation that just got uploaded like 3 days ago. Catholic Approaches to Queer Theology, a primer. How are Catholic theologians engaging the growing field of scholarship called queer theology? This program features 3 theologians who helped introduce queer theology, a research area that includes theology done by LGBTQ plus people. And also, why do I always get a spam call right when I go live on the internet? The panel, this program features theologians who help introduce queer theory as research areas that include theology done by LGBTQ plus people, and also asks how queer identities open new possibilities in thinking about God, ethics, scripture, and all areas of Christian thought. And we've got Nicolette. Nicolette is she, hers, the social and environmental justice lead at the London Jesuit Center. Her research focuses on using Pope Francis's teachings to navigate difficulties in the church's encounter with transness. We have Travis, he, him. Travis focuses on research on dissent and normative contestation in the Roman Catholic Church. He holds degrees from Oxford and the College of the Holy Cross. And then we have Laurel. Laurel teaches theology at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. Laurel researches and worships in collaboration with marginal, I don't know what that word is, communities in El Salvador, and also does other stuff too. So those are the people we are going to be hearing from today as we learn about how the Catholic Church is going to be queer. That is what we're going to be watching. But as always, I have a couple orders of business before we get started. And then we're going to talk about beer. We're gonna do the thing I don't want to do first. We have a couple orders of business, and I apologize. I didn't actually want to talk about this. It was my plan today just to move on. And then right before I went live, well, some information came I became aware of some information that I'm being forced into the position of needing to address this again. Because it's not enough that I had to spend 2 hours today DMing with this asshole on Discord, in which he is still taking no responsibility for what he did. He is taking no responsibility for the fact that he did an entire stream about me, or an entire segment about me, on Tuesday, in which he insinuated out to the Groypers that I was infiltrating their organization to cause problems. No. He is completely innocent in this regard. He did nothing wrong. He cannot admit to his role in any of this, and it was all my fault for responding to him. First responding to him in private, where I gave him the chance to walk this back, and then responding to him in public because he publicly accused me of infiltrating the Groypers to cause problems when that was not what was happening at all. And so I spent about 2 hours today, again, against my better judgment, talking to him about this. And got nowhere. No acknowledgement. No nothing. But yesterday he did do a stream, and the stream he did yesterday is the reason I was talking to him about it, because in the stream he did yesterday, Big Tech not only did not answer to the accusations that Well, I won't even say accusations. Big Tech did not answer to what I said in my stream about him. No, 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 no. Big Tech instead decided to insinuate that I had feelings for him and this was all me coming on to him and he would never wanted any part of it and it was just all me and this was all about some ploy and blah 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 blah. Now keep in mind he has access to our at least my entire DM history with him. He deleted his entire DM history with me, but I didn't delete my entire DM history with him. So he has access to be able to go back and find any screenshots he wants in which I'm saying anything to that effect at all. And guess what? He can't do it because it doesn't exist. Because what we talked about was things relating to World War II, things relating to Hitler, things relating to Jews, things relating to other content creators. Things were like, I mean, there's really like maybe there was some innocent flirting back and forth here and there, but nothing that was any more than what I've done with anyone online, to include Nick Fuentes himself. But no, no, no. He had to do a stream in which he insinuated that I was just in love with him and all this shit. And guess what happened because of that? Big Tech is about to make some new friends. Big Tech is now about to hear from the retards on Twitter that have been stalking me and harassing me every day of my life for years. And those retards on Twitter are insinuating that I'm cheating on my husband with him or trying to cheat on my husband with him because of the impressions that he gave on his stream. Now, the retarded cancel horde on Twitter has no idea that Big Tech is a Nazi. Literally, he's a National Socialist, literally loves Hitler, fucking loves Hitler. And I'm not like, I'm not going to make any judgments about that. But I'm just saying that the same people who have been coming after me for being against what Israel is doing in Palestine ever since it started, the same people who are coming after me for associating it all with Nick Fuentes are now aligning themselves with a literal National Socialist. He is a National Socialist. Of course, they don't realize that because they don't know anything about him or who he is or what went on. But they'll use everything that he said in his stream against me because Big Tech really couldn't fucking take responsibility. Just couldn't take responsibility for the fact that he did a stream in which he insinuated that I was infiltrating the Groypers. And instead of answering the fact that I was more than a little pissed off about that, he decided to double down and do another stream that insinuated that I was just in love with him and all this shit and I was going after him and he just wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted nothing to do with it. It's not as though he was answering my DMs and engaging in conversation with me and having late night calls with me and, telling me things that he really doesn't want to be public. It's not as though he was doing any of this. It's not as though Big Tech was proactively commenting on pictures, specifically on the boob situation, on pictures that I was posting on the internet. It's not as though I don't have clips of Big Tech saying that I was posting these pictures for him, which actually wasn't true. I post these pictures for me. I don't post these pictures for him. I post these pictures for me and for me alone because I like them. But no, Big Tech, I have a clip of him saying that I was just doing all this for him. No, that's not it. I've got clips of him talking about how much he likes me. I've got clips of him talking about all this stuff. No, none of that seems to matter. None of that seems to matter at all. Thank you, Maria. I do think that's a great picture of me. Thank you, Joseph. I think I do look sexy in that picture. Big Tech also thought I looked very sexy in this picture too. In fact, there was an additional discussion about this picture specifically in Discord DMs after that. And isn't it convenient that Big Tech deleted those messages? Oh wait, he admitted on his stream yesterday that he deleted those messages because he didn't want me to be able to prove any of this. He literally said that on his stream. Now, I'm not going to say there wasn't innocent flirting because there was, but it's like the same innocent flirting that I do with the grapers. It's the same innocent flirting that I do when I say mount the like button in the chat. It's the same innocent flirting that I do with anyone on the internet. You want to know why? Because flirting is fun. It's fun and it feels good. So why not? But what he did was insinuate that there was something more going on when there wasn't. And I'll be the first to say that I think that his flirting with me was just as innocent. I think it was just to pass the time. I didn't think anything of it really. But now, because of what he's done, my husband is being dragged into this, and insinuations are being made on the internet. And this is why men like Big Tech should just take responsibility for their actions and what they did to cause my response in the fucking first place. But you know what? I think this is great that Big Tech is making new friends. I mean, he's lost me as a friend at this point, so he's got to make some more friends. And I think the woke cancel horde of insane Zionists, because these are all Zionists, by the way. All these people are Zionists. All these people have no idea that Big Tech is a literal Nazi that loves Hitler. I think this is great. He's making new Zionist friends. He's probably going to become a Zionist at any minute because he's done pissed off everyone on the dissident right, can't admit to any of his role in any of this, couldn't just stick to the grievances that I fucking made, couldn't take any responsibility for what he said and did to cause this at all. So I wish him the very best of luck. I wish him the best of luck with the woke cancel horde. And I'm still like curious about like, you know, he just didn't want anything to do with it. He just, you know what? Listen, men who typically don't want anything to do with me are not commenting about my tits publicly. And you know what else they're not doing? You know what else they're not doing? They're also not, hang on. Let me make sure I don't reveal information I don't intend you to see. They're also not telling me their secrets on phone calls at 4 a.m. that they really don't want revealed. He pretends this didn't happen now, but it did happen. And I remember what I was told on those phone calls at 4 a.m. And you know, if I have to deal with too much shit, maybe I will reveal what was said on those phone calls at 4 a.m. If he doesn't correct this situation and make it very, 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 very clear what happened and what didn't, maybe I will reveal the secret that he told me on that 4 a.m. phone call that he swears never happened now, but did happen. And if he thinks I don't have a screenshot proof of that happening, he is out of his ever-loving mind. I could took a screenshot at the time. In fact, hang on, let me see if I can find it. In fact, hang on. Let me see if I can find the screenshot real quick. Just to make sure. Actually, you know what? It's probably going to be my... Hang on. Do-do-do-do-do. What's this? What's this? What's this? He wants to deny this happened? Okay. All right. He wants to leave the impression that I was doing anything that I shouldn't have been doing in public because he has feelings that he doesn't want to deal with. Okay. But I'll tell you what, if I have to deal with just a tiny amount of bullshit in relation to that cancel horde, relating to me, relating to my husband, relating to my marriage, as a result of the bullshit that he decided to do on his stream yesterday, maybe I will reveal what was said to me at 4 a.m. on that 4-hour. Do you guys tend to talk? Do you guys tend to talk to people on the phone for 4 hours that you don't enjoy talking with? I don't. I don't at all. So we can play this little game if he wants to, and we'll just see what happens. So, Mike, I wish you the very best of luck with your new friends that haven't realized that you're a literal Nazi yet, that are going to kiss up to you until they realize that you're a literal Nazi. And I'll just remind you, bro, none of this had to happen. Literally, none of this had to happen. You could have just answered my grievances like a fucking man. You didn't have to insinuate I was doing shit that I wasn't doing, that you have no evidence that I was doing. Or better yet, you really just shouldn't have done the stream, the part on your stream on Tuesday when you insinuated that I was infiltrating the Groypers when I wasn't. And I don't give a flying fuck if you think it was a joke and you thought you were being funny. That caused problems for me, and it never should have happened in the first place. So he can have all the fun with that he wants. And, on that note, I wanted to mention this yesterday. So this is kind of like a related topic, but not really. So fun fact, there's a lawsuit going on right now, and I'm not going to say too much about the lawsuit, except one of the people involved in the lawsuit is a woman named Jen Richardson. Jen Richardson goes by the name Little Ragamuffin. Jen Richardson was tangential to the knitting wars. She was like a pattern maker that got canceled for her, like, down home country fucking sewing patterns or whatever the fuck. Jen Richardson is friends with Carrie Smith. And there's a lawsuit involving Jen Richardson in which one of the elements of discovery is that Jen Richardson, along with Carrie Smith, along with Mike Harlow, they were all coordinating my harassment via private Telegram groups. So because Jen Richardson is involved in this lawsuit, and because discovery is going on in this lawsuit, the people they basically all of the private Telegram groups that Jen Richardson was in, and all of the private messages that Jen Richardson has, have now been collected as part of discovery. And guess what? Someone reached out to me about this because it turns out that I was mentioned quite a few times in those private messages. Here you're going to see a DM with Adam Coleman. Adam Coleman is a so-called anti-woke thought leader. Adam Coleman goes by Wrong Speak on Twitter. I've got a whole bunch of messages, and I didn't even post them all. I now have a whole bunch of messages from Adam Coleman's private DMs in which he's colluding to harass me on Twitter. And so I'm going to be getting more of those because there are more of them that exist than what I posted so far. Here, by the way, is Jen Richardson harassing me a couple years ago, in which she threatened to try to get my psychology license removed because I was using tarot cards. This is and I don't and this didn't really worry me at the time because, like, I didn't really need a psychologist. I don't need. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm an industrial organizational psychologist. You don't need to be licensed to do what I do. And so all the time people have been trying to get my psychology license removed when I don't actually need a psychology license to practice. So good luck with that. But this is Jen Richardson publicly threatening me on Twitter to get my license removed because she doesn't like tarot cards. And these are Jen Richardson's private DMs with Adam Coleman, in which they're talking about me. They're making fun of me. They're coordinating to harass me because they just can't wait to shut me up. This was all back in 2021. And no, I'm not letting it go because these assholes colluded for years to try to destroy my work. And I can't wait to see more of the DMs. And I am going to be seeing more of the DMs because here's the message from the person who sent them to me in the first place. I'm still trying to get more. There is so much more. I will tell you that they both have dozens of fake profiles and are vicious when they decide to go after someone and use the whole Christian thing as a weapon. They all just had a meetup in Austin last month. They are a very sick crew, and I think some of them really believe they're doing the Lord's work. And guess what? Jen Richardson has 66 followers on Twitter on her public account. 3 of those 66 followers are Adam Coleman, Carrie Smith, and Mike Harlow. So just a funny aside, like I knew about this a while ago, but I never actually saw the images up until like yesterday. And hopefully I'll be getting a lot more images in the discovery for this lawsuit so we can really see what was going on in the private Facebook groups that Carrie and Mike Harlow, whose real name is Michael Bernstein, by the way. And that's public knowledge. I'm not doxing or anything. That's his, I'm just saying that his last name is Bernstein for no apparent reason. We're going to be able to see what happened in those private Facebook groups when they were apparently talking about me an awful lot. And I'm really looking forward to getting a hold of that information to prove exactly what I said was happening all along, that these people were actively coordinating to destroy my life, destroy my reputation, destroy my work. And now, because of this lawsuit, we get to see all of it. Oh, big tech is sniping me right now. Well, let's talk about big tech's new friends then. Let's talk about big tech's new friends. Big tech's new friends who don't realize that big tech is a neo-Nazi, or I don't really know if he's a neo-Nazi. I think maybe just proper Nazi is probably more correct. He's going to have a lot of fun with these people. So I don't know. I don't have any good show to give for big tech right now because I don't really have that much more to say about him. I think that when someone insinuates that I was doing things that I didn't do because he's not man enough to take responsibility for what he did, and the end result of that, when he knew that these people existed. By the way, big tech knew that these people existed because I told him about it. The last time he did this bullshit to me, the last time he was unnecessarily bringing me up on his stream for no apparent reason, I told him, I was like, I know you don't know this, but there's a horde of people who just watch everything that's said about me online and they make it their business to use everything against me, to harass me. And he said, oh, no, I didn't know that was the thing. I didn't know that was the thing. Well, he knows now, doesn't he? He knows now, but he's got a new set of Zionist best friends. And so I just really wish him the very best of luck with his new set of Zionist best friends. And I wish him the very best of luck with being a part of an obsessive cancel horde. And yeah, I don't really have much more to say about that. I really don't. Completely, except it was completely fucking unnecessary. The SPLC now considers traditional Catholicism as a hate ideology, and it tracks it on a hate map and has given it a dedicated webpage. Thank you, Milo. Fun fact. Since Butt Tech is sniping, no wonder why Groypers denied him, is divorced and is withering and stewing in his teen angst. Grow the F up, dude. I mean, I don't know, man. I personally would have settled for him taking responsibility for doing a stream in which he insinuated that I was infiltrating the Groypers when I wasn't. I personally would have settled for that. I think that maybe if all he had done was been like, you know what, Carlin's right, and maybe I shouldn't have said that, and I was trying to be funny, and maybe not all jokes land on the internet. I make jokes that don't land all the time, and so I could forgive someone just saying, it was a joke, it just didn't land, and it gave the wrong impression, and my bad. Like, she really wasn't. I wasn't some sort of puppet master that was trying to orchestrate this whole thing to cause problems with the Groypers. Nope, that wasn't what happened. I think I personally would have just settled for that, but no, he had to take it into places that it really didn't fucking go, just to cause problems, just to make himself feel better. And now taking it to those places has opened big tech up to a whole new group of internet friends with which he can collude to harass me. He can coordinate to harass me. His audience can get involved with his friends. Like, his audience hates me now. So his audience can get involved with this. It'll be fucking great for all of them. Whole bunch of new friends that now, again, like, they're Zionists. They're they're very pro-Israel. That might be a sticking point. But it's nice when like-minded people on the internet find each other. It's nice when people connect over just open and blatant harassment of someone for years and years and years and years and years on end. It's nice when energies align. He's found his people. I think this is great. I don't really have anything else to say about it. All right. Can we talk about beer? Because I think I fucking deserve a drink. I think I deserve a drink. And I went to the beer store right before this. I got 4 beers. We do have a happy hour tradition in which I tell you guys about the beers that I got and you vote on which beer I drink first. So the first one we have is called, let's see, Pulp Up the Late Night Jams. Very 80s looking beer. This is going on my beer can wall. My beer can wall is coming together, by the way. I've got a whole bunch of beer cans that have cool designs. And this is an Imperial Sour. I didn't realize this was an Imperial. This is 8% alcohol. And this is a triple stack strawberry chocolate chip pancake with whipped cream. And this is from Kettlehead Brewing. Where is Kettlehead? I think it's in New Hampshire. Franklin, New Hampshire. New Hampshire beer. Yay. This is strawberry chocolate chip pancake. That's the first one. The second one is from the brewery in Somersworth, New Hampshire, that I can never pronounce the name of, but it starts with an O. You guys can see it. I don't know how to pronounce the name of it. But this is called Raspberry Kazam, and this is 6%, so it's like basically a little bit more than a regular beer. And it's a sour ale brewed with raspberries and lactose. So it's going to be like a little bit creamier. Anytime you have something with lactose, it's going to be a little bit more like a smoothie style sour. It's going to be a little thicker, a little creamier. So it's going to be basically like a raspberry and cream type sour beer. The next one, I don't like this can. This can looked like an old lady designed it. This can looks like Poetry Painter designed it. And it's called Chloe's Cotton Candy Sour, and this is from Stark Brewing. This is only 5% alcohol, but it might make up for it with being about cotton candy. Stark Brewing Company is in Manchester, New Hampshire, so another I think are all my beers New Hampshire today? All my beers are New Hampshire today. It's like the New Hampshire, I was going to say trifecta, but quadfecta, maybe. That's fine. Chloe is sometimes a sourpuss, but mostly a sweet kitty. Like Chloe, this Berliner Weiss style beer. So Berliner Weiss is going to be lighter. It's going to be like nice and crisp. This Berliner Weiss style beer has a nice, clean, tart, sour character and is perfectly balanced with plenty of sweet cotton candy with a healthy dose of wheat and oats. This really tastes and smells like the big, pillowy cone of cotton candy that you would get at the fair, perfect for riding around the Ferris wheel. So that's going to be our third option, is the cotton candy beer. And our last one, and this goes out to Dragon Balls, because he told me yesterday, he sent me some beer money, and he said, Carlin, get an Imperial Stout. Well, I didn't get an Imperial Stout, but I got an Imperial Porter. So basically the same thing, like a nice dark beer that's very alcoholic. This is 8.5% alcohol, and it's called Cocoa Pine Grove. It is an Imperial Porter, and I think it's probably just going to have some chocolate undertones, and that's going to be really great. So I'm putting the poll in the chat over on YouTube. Again, we've got our Pulp Up the Jam, which is our strawberry chocolate chip pancake. We've got our Raspberry Kazam, which is like raspberries and cream. We've got our Cotton Candy Sour. And we have got our Cocoa Imperial Porter. Let me know which one you want me to drink first on the stream as we get into our discussion of queer and Catholicism today. Half Orc Fighter says, I'm drinking old fashions made with tequila while making rosaries. Oh, look, what a wholesome hobby. I fear this stream will anger me greatly and sadden me. Yeah, it probably will, Half Orc Fighter. But good thing you got those old fashions to keep you company, and rosaries. I mean, always nice to have a craft. I appreciate that. All right, let's see. What is the vote looking like? I'll give you guys another 30 seconds to vote. I would like to get some more votes in. In the meantime, please mount the like button for me if you would be so kind. As a reminder, I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. on YouTube, on X, and on Rumble. We do Socialism Saturdays on Saturdays at 6 p.m. And I don't know what we're gonna watch tomorrow, but I promise it's gonna be very dystopian. How was my time walking around Detroit? Yasmin, I don't want to talk about that, okay? It was a traumatic experience. All right, last chance to vote. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We are doing the strawberry chocolate chip pancake. It was almost the cotton candy. The cotton candy came in a close second. So let's get this poured. And if you're drinking something fun, let us know in the chat what you're drinking. Oh, this definitely smells like strawberry. Definitely strawberry. Cheers, everyone. Happy Friday. All right, let's get this party started and learning how they're queering Catholicism.
Welcome on behalf of New Ways Ministries staff. I am glad that you can be with us this evening or this morning, or it's very late at night for some folks, including one of our panelists. I am Bob Shine, pronounce he, him. I am the Associate Director of New Ways Ministry. And we are a Catholic outreach for LGBTQ people that was begun in 1977 and has continued to do different programs, but one of our main goals is education. We like to help Catholics understand LGBTQ issues as they evolve. And as you know, by registering for this, queer theology is an emerging and expanding field of scholarly research. But for those of us outside the academy, maybe we don't know what it is or what its possibilities are for people who are not just theologians. How could it impact the rest of us? So tonight, for Pride, we're here to hopefully give a few more answers to questions like that, and some of the questions that have come in via the registrations and that you can ask now too. Before we begin, I'd like to invite Bernie Donlin, who is the coordinator for digital content and programs here at New Ways, to lead us in an opening prayer.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Okay, everyone pray.
Creator and sustainer of all things, we thank you for gathering us together. We know that even though we gather in this virtual space, you are present with us. We ask that you bless this discussion and help us to open our minds and our hearts to the wisdom our panelists have to offer us about queer theology. God, we know that we are all created in your image and likeness. At this webinar and throughout Pride Month, help each of us see the dignity in all of your creation. Please be with those who feel that they are not loved, honored, or respected due to their identity. May we uplift ourselves and others lovingly, knowing that we are all your beloved creation. Let what we hear tonight ignite our hearts and move us to live as your disciples in all that we do. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by Brian Flanagan, who is New Ways Ministries Senior Fellow. He's a theologian who is an expert on synodality. Perhaps you've attended the webinar he did for us a few years ago on spirituality of synodality. He is the former president of the College Theology Society. And for tonight, he is our host. So I will turn it over to Brian, who will tell you a little bit more about what the program will entail and who our speakers are. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Bob, and good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to have so many people on a Monday evening who want to learn about theology. If we only had that in some of our intro classes in college. It's my great joy to be with some really wonderful theologians tonight who will introduce in a moment. But what I will point out is that we're having a conversation tonight. So I have some questions that I have about what queer theology is and what difference it can make in our church. I have some questions that some of you submitted to us as you were registering, but there's also options for questions as they occur during this conversation. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, if you're using a laptop or if you're using a phone, it's by clicking one of the other buttons, you see that Q&A feature. You can send a question in if you want to ask if someone can explain a point more, if you want to ask if somebody can elaborate, or if something comes up and brings up more that you want to learn about tonight. But happy Pride. We're doing our Pride event here by thinking about what is this thing called queer theology. And I'm very happy that with me, I have three people who are colleagues, who are wonderful theologians working in a whole bunch of fields, who have engaged with queer theology, who I'm also very happy to call friends. So I'm going to be introducing them first, and then we'll get all together on screen. So Dr. Nicolette Burbach is the Social and Environmental Justice Lead at the London Jesuit Center. Her research focuses upon using Pope Francis's teachings to navigate difficulties in the church's encounter with transness. And Nicolette is coming in from London tonight. So Dr. Burbach is at midnight, not 7:30, where it is on the East Coast. So we're really grateful for her participation this evening. Our second panelist is Dr. Travis Lecoutre, who is currently a postdoctoral research fellow at KU, the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, where his research focuses on dissent and normative contestation in the Roman Catholic Church. Dr. Lecoutre holds degrees from Oxford University and the College of the Holy Cross, and his writings can be found in Commonweal, U.S. Catholic, the L.A. Review of Books, and most importantly, Bondings 2.0, the New Ways Ministry Law, where we also have found writings by Dr. Burbach, and we also will find writings by our third speaker, Dr. Laurel Potter. Dr. Potter teaches theology at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul, Minnesota. Laurel researches and worships in collaboration with marginal ecclesial communities in El Salvador, where she lived and worked for several years. And I'm hoping she'll also be able to help us see some of the connections of queer theology with other forms and histories of liberation theologies. So for me, this is just a joy. This is what theologians do for fun, as we get to sit around and talk to each other about some of what we're working on and some of why it's important. So my first question, and I'm gonna ask Dr. Nicolette, Dr. Burbach. I'll be probably calling you Nikki, but we all know she's doctor by the thing. One of the questions I have for all three panelists, and I'll ask Nikki to speak first, is for those of us who have never encountered this term before, but maybe have read something about it, or at least read enough on the web, what is queer theology? What does this idea mean? What are some of the possible ways
That is a great
that
question.
we could define queer theology?
Well, thanks, Brian, and it's really great to be here. So I think for me, queer theology is trying to do theology in a way that's informed by the kinds of challenges and opportunities that come with queerness. Queerness is like a way of being that's sort of at odds with the norms or the rules which govern the way in which people identify themselves and each other, and the ways in which we navigate our desires in society. So it's kind of doing theology from that sort of, not quite an outsider perspective, but like a perspective that's kind of fundamentally at odds with things, and allowing either a kind of process of destruction and disruption, which opens up a space for something new. And
Queer is anything that is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. And they're basically saying the same thing here. Let's listen again.
that sort of, not quite an outsider perspective, but like a perspective that's kind of fundamentally at odds with things, and allowing either a kind of process of destruction.
Hang on. Autumn isn't shadow banned. Autumn, and this is one of Autumn's alt accounts, it's also about to be banned. Autumn was talking shit in my comments last night and got herself banned. So no, Autumn, you aren't shadow banned. You're just banned. And now this account's going to get banned too. And you shouldn't have been talking shit in my comments.
And disruption, which
Let's
opens
listen
up
to that
a
again. Hang on.
like technology from that sort of not quite an outsider perspective, but like a perspective that's kind of fundamentally at odds with things, and allowing either a kind of process of destruction and disruption, which opens up a space for something new and something positive to emerge, or even living in a way that kind of sees hope in this sort of awkwardness and disruption. And that's something I find very profound as a theologian.
Yeah, disruption is or should be part of our discourse about God in most ways. But yes, Laurel, do you want to give us a little bit about your thoughts about just what queer theology is?
Sure. I want to name for some people that the word queer might still have some negative connotations or offensive connotations even. I was talking with an elderly family member recently who was telling me about her childhood and mentioned the game Smear the Queer, and then looked at me in a horrified way and said, "Oh, but we didn't mean it like that." So for whatever that's worth, we recognize that Smear the Queer, even the name of that game, is based on wanting to eliminate or push to the side or harm people, exactly as Nikki said, that are deemed different from the norm or who exist in a place of discomfort or opposition to like dominant society. So queer is a word that is being reclaimed and put in a positive light, or at least a light that has life and space to exist in a legitimate.
Okay, I'm just going to let my audience comment on how stupid this idea is. Because this started before AFPAC, bro. Big Tech has been an asshole to me literally for weeks now. We used to be cool. I was hoping it could still be cool. I was hoping he would stop being an asshole. But no, this is absolutely not fake. This is not fake at all. But you can believe whatever you want. I don't really care. But like, not you can look at the people in my chat, because they've been listening to me complain about this for they've been listening to me complain about this before I was even complaining about it publicly.
Legitimate way. So queer theology, queer can be an umbrella term to
All right,
include
well,
a lot
now
of
you're
different
banned. Goodbye.
LGBTIA plus identities. And it also means the interplay between the academic field of queer theory and theology. So just as like disability theology will reflect on disability theory from a theological perspective, so queer theology tries to take queer theory, the ways that people are theorizing or articulating ideas about gender and sexuality and human expression and embodiment, and think about that from a particular religious tradition or from many religious traditions. So queer theology is a way of doing Christian theology or comparative theology or Muslim theology or whatever field or tradition you're coming from, informed by these ways of thinking about human embodiment and sexuality that are emerging from queer theory.
Thanks, Laura. And that makes it really interesting. It makes it sound much more, in some ways, traditional, right? Because theology has always said, let's dialogue with this discourse in another part of the culture. So Thomas Aquinas using Aristotle, or Augustine using Plato. And so queer theology is saying, okay, how can we interact with these theorists of queer theory and who are thinking about LGBTQIA plus realities? And how does that help us develop, change our ideas about God and who we are in light of that? Travis, what would you add about what queer theology is?
No, that's great. I would echo everything that's been said. I'm show my systematic theologian proclivities and break things into threes here. But I think about what is queer theology, and I suppose there's three answers one could give. One is it's a historical academic discipline, or it's an academic discipline with its own history and lineage, like Laurel was just talking about. A theological engagement with the body of literature and research that we call queer theory, arising out of the work of people like Michel Foucault, Judith Butler, and others. And in that sense, it represents a theological engagement with a stream of intellectual culture that's really been developing in the last certainly 50, 60 years, we could say, but of course has much deeper roots.
Guys, if there are any obvious trolls coming into the chat just to cause problems, I'm no longer going to engage with them. I'm just going to ban them. And if I don't see them, please time them out or something until I get to it.
So it's an academic approach and discipline. It's also an apologetic strategy. There's queer theologians who will see their work as speaking to the church, right? To demonstrate that not only queer people have a place in the church, but that theology can be done in this way. And indeed by such people, right? So in that sense, it represents an attempt to speak the language of the church, which we could think of as theology, with an eye towards the concerns, the life experiences, right, and so on of queer people. And much of what falls under this heading, is unsurprisingly arguing for a greater scope of dignity and a change in attitudes within Christianity towards queer people. And finally, more broadly, perhaps most broadly, queer theology could also be thought of as tapping into something inherent in all theology. And this, I think, is also kind of the specter of this has been raised. So if queer refers to that which is anti-normative, that which goes against what is assumed and received, then there is something in theology, arguably, that is always doing this. In as much as theology is about challenging our received notions of God and what faith in God means for our life, both individually and socially. And so you will have queer theologians who want to make the claim, for instance, that all theology is queer in the sense of this kind of anti-normative or at least critical dialogue with the past. These are three aspects that I think I want to go into as we continue, but that's how I think of queer theology.
Oh, thanks, Travis. I want to get this even a little more concrete because some of our listeners maybe took a theology course or two when they were in college. Maybe they know that Christology is different than studying moral theology, is different than studying Bible. So I want to guess a little bit, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in first answer this. How is queer theory or queer theology interacted with your work? Because the three of you are not doing only work in queer theology. You're doing work in other areas of theology and other questions that we have in our theology. So where are some concrete examples of where this has changed or helped develop the work that you're doing in some of those quote unquote more traditional theological topics? And whoever wants to jump in first, go for it.
I'll kick something off here. I mean, I did a doctorate on a old dead white guy theologian, one of the canonical figures of the 20th century in Catholic theology, Hans Urs von Balthasar, and he's an interesting character in a number of ways, but his work has been engaged and not as typically associated with queer theology, I hasten to add. But his work has been engaged by queer theologians in sometimes very, I think, interesting and provocative ways. And so I first came in, I would say, to really studying queer theology in an organized and specific way through interpretive debates to do with a theologian who I was studying in a rather different context. And this, I think, is important for the way queer theology has established itself in the broader Christian Catholic theological discourse. By engaging in canonical figures, in evergreen topics, like you say, Brian, Christology, soteriology, eschatology. Queer theology is very often there, intervening in those debates and really enriching, I think, the field of theological discourse that we're dealing with. My work on that did not go in a kind of queer studies direction, but since that time, I've taught classes in theology and sexuality, and Catholic ecclesiology, and political theology, and a number of other topics that have all been enriched by the contributions of queer theology and queer theologians that are on reading lists, and so forth. And I think it's really an important part of this too. There's an important pedagogical that is, related to our teaching as theologians. There's an important pedagogical role or place for queer theology because the next generation, the younger generation of students of theology, whatever their background or presuppositions. They want to know, right, that theology is engaging with questions of sexuality, gender, embodiment, and consequently justice, and so on. So in my teaching, it's certainly been a great sort of resource, if I could put it that way.
Yeah.
And just finally, my current project is, as you said in the introduction, on this work on dissent. And through that project, I've had the chance to talk to people like Roman Catholic women priests, out gay priests, and those whose identity in various other ways puts them at odds with the structures and
The normal,
authorities
the
of the
legitimate,
Catholic Church.
the dominant.
Queer theology has been a guide for me to understand, or to try to understand, that we can do theology from the experience, right, of people who don't fit in the church's established normative theological categories, and that those voices indeed matter greatly for how we do theology today.
So there's nothing wrong inherently with reaching out to people that may not be a traditional part of the church, right? In fact, some might argue that that's what the Catholic Church should be doing. The Catholic Church should be, reaching out to people from, like I guess the types of people probably that Jesus would have served, like in these communities where maybe they do need help, they need guidance, they need community, stuff like that. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But what I want people to hear is the reason that they're talking about doing theology in this way is not that they're trying to reach out to the downtrodden masses in order to provide them with a spiritual belief system, in order to provide them with a community, in order to provide them with resources, in order to provide them with any of these things. That's not why they're doing it. They're doing it to fundamentally pervert the systems of the church. So these are very, very different things, right? What they're talking about is getting people into the church that are going to fundamentally subvert the institution of the church. And if anyone else has a better way to describe this, please let me know. I'm kind of like figuring out how to describe this on the fly to people who might not be as familiar with queer Marxism and queer theory as some of us. Teresa says, my issue is it seems to be talking all the Marxist struggles with it. Yeah, this is about integrating Marxism into the church. This is about deconstructing the church. They're trying to subvert the patriarchal structure. Very, very true. Yeah, this is about a takeover of the church from the inside. A takeover of the normative church. Do they have their own organization from the normal Catholics? Well, no, this is within the normal. This is within my understanding of this. These are like Catholic theologians. Maybe I just don't understand what we're listening to, but that's my understanding.
So I would say I've been very grateful for the contributions of queer theology in my work, and I think it matters very much to what I'm doing now, in a way that I think is quite exciting to me personally.
Thanks, Travis. Laura or Nicolette, do you want to talk a little bit about either of those cases where queer theology has helped you read a source for the tradition or enter into a discussion in the tradition differently, or the pedagogical, since both of you are teaching as well as doing research?
Yeah, I can say, as Travis was speaking, I was thinking about how often I say I'm a queer person doing theology, but I'm not necessarily doing queer theology. Because as Travis pointed out, it is, I haven't studied a lot of queer.
Look, she has she, they pronouns.
Theory. And so if I'm understanding queer theology as theological reflection on queer theory, I can't speak for like the intellectual work that some of those founding figures and people working constructively on queer theory are doing. And we can't assume that that academic work can always be understood in my only lived experience, right? So part of part of identifying like where I work or how queer theology comes into what I'm working on has to do with the recognition that this isn't my primary field. So even I think all of us on this panel identify with that conversation in some way or another, that we're queer people doing theology, but not always or only doing queer theology. The ways that it does run into my work, though, is understanding that when we're talking about topics like liberation or justice or decoloniality, to leave a queer perspective out of that conversation means that we're not understanding those dynamics fully, right? So if we start from a position of thinking about material poverty or politics or racial inequities or identities and ethnicities, and we're leaving out how queerness or how queer experiences flow through all of those different identity factors, we're not going to understand the human dynamics there clearly, and we're not going to be able to draw on this resource of queer spirituality and lived embodiment as children of God in our theological analysis of what's going on. So I find myself increasingly needing to draw on queer theology in order to talk about liberation or decoloniality or justice. It's an essential piece of understanding the whole picture.
Yep.
Thanks, Laura. Can I
Decoloniality,
just do a follow-up before we go to Nikki?
liberation.
Do you have any like concrete examples of where your engagement with queer theory has helped you learn something in your research or teach something differently than you would have had you not engaged with queer theory or engaged with queer theology? That's a very on-the-spot question, but
yeah, I mean, I do think it's an entry point for my students in a way sometimes that historical takes on liberation theology aren't. So I teach liberation theology to a particular group of students that are interested in theology and the common good here at the University of St. Thomas. And we did Gustavo Gutierrez.
Oh, wow. That would be very nice of him, wouldn't it? That would be very nice of him to do that. He definitely wouldn't prove that he is every piece of rotten human garbage in the world if he did that. What an asshole. Unfucking believable. Unfucking believable. I absolutely made the right choice with the Groypers. I'll say that. No, there's really nothing left to do. It's like, it is what it is. He is exposing himself. He is exposing himself. You know what? Kiwi Farms went after him. Kiwi Farms lied about him. Kiwi Farms doxed his kids, doxed his ex-wife. Kiwi Farms did all this shit to him. And if he's honestly going to go read anything about me on Kiwi Farms and present it as the truth, when in fact it's just bullshit, then he has absolutely shown his true colors. Listen, like I've watched people descend into this like internet pit of insanity, and I'm quite frankly really pissed off that I even have to address this. Like, I've watched people go from being normal, good, kind human beings to descending into just the most toxic like, you know, the movie, what is that zombie movie that we liked where they're zombies but they come back to life? Does anyone remember the name of this movie? We watched it for movie night. What is the name of that movie? The zombie movie where they come back to life. What is the name of that movie? Warm Bodies. Thank you, Reagan. Warm Bodies. So in Warm Bodies, they're like, most of the zombies still have some like type of human form, but the zombies that have just that are not, that like, most of the zombies, if they're still in human form, are redeemable and they can come back to life again. But there's a group of zombies called the Bonies, where they're basically just skeletons, and there's nothing left. There is no humanity left. And I've seen people on the internet go from being like normal people to being the Bonies, where it's like there was 1 minute where they were kind and they were empathetic and they were good people and they cared about the truth and they cared about decency and they cared about ethics and moral integrity and like all those things. And then they get sucked into these internet rabbit holes and feuds where they lose everything about themselves that made them a good person. And it is, and when this happens to people, you can watch like the first person that started harassing me several years ago, he looks nothing today like what he did several years ago. He has gained a metric ton of weight. The toxicity reads all over his face. By the way, he's completely irrelevant. He has like 3 people watching his streams now because he built his entire brand on harassing me. And then once that was over and once people no longer cared about it anymore, he had nothing left. He has like 3 people watching him at any given time. So if that's the road that big tech wants to take, if that's where he wants to go, if he wants to become a bony like the rest of the A-logs, if he wants to do that, then his content's just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And his audience is going to get more and more and more and more toxic. And as they get more and more and more and more toxic, they're going to have less and less and less and less and less money. And I wish him the very best of luck. No, that's exactly what he's doing. That's exactly what he's doing. Yeah, I definitely made the right call. Whatever.
Gutierrez and Latin America in the 60s, and we kind of went through Oscar Romero and the war and all of that. And we talked about James Cone in the US and God is Black and all of his assertions as a young person doing theological reflection on the Black Panther Party. And they were interested, they followed along, but as soon as we started talking about queer theology and as soon as we started talking about ecofeminisms, that's so much closer to their experience that I think even reflecting on Gutierrez and Cone through the lens of queer theology helped them get what Gutierrez and Cone were talking about. Mm-hmm. So because Latin America in the 60s or the civil rights movement is a little historically further removed from their experience, they can get the dynamics of liberation and the dynamics of queering or how important an outside perspective is. And that helps them understand these other facets of liberation, which is really pretty exciting.
Yeah, I found that too when I was teaching in some ways. This will disappoint some of our viewers, perhaps, the civil rights movement is sort of ancient history for some of our students, but in some ways around LGBTQIA plus issues, they're living in this moment where these are some of the most pressing justice issues of our time for many of our students and for many of us as theologians. Nikki, would you care to chime in about sort of how this fits with your theological interests and work?
Sure. So, I mean, it's kind of a source that I keep coming back to. Some of you may have seen a documentary called Paris is Burning, which is about what's known as the ball scene in New York in the 70s and 80s. These were basically like drag balls, which had a variety of sort of drag-based competitions that marginalized queer people would take part in. People really living on the margins of society, living in poverty and exclusion. And one of the scenes in this documentary shows one of the categories where people dress up as like aspirational things, like a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO. And one of the behind this is that you can live.
It's on their end, not on my end. It's on their end.
About this kind of fantasy, and people be like, "Oh yeah, lawyer." And I think that what this illustrates is that queer people often live in a way where you can't take for granted a lot of like the possibilities or assumptions that normally like are seen as there for people. So, you know, you're probably not going to get to be a doctor or a CEO. And it means that queer people have historically had to, sorry, are you able to hear what I'm saying?
We are now. There's a little bit of a bump, but keep going.
Briefly. No? Are you frozen again? Okay. Are we good?
We're good for now. Do your best. We'll move on.
Okay, if we just talk pretty quickly. No, I won't. But basically, queer people have had to negotiate their place in the world.
Socialists hate technology.
The kinds of hopes and the kinds of desires that they've had filling, and having to navigate a lot of ambivalent feelings about the stuff that we're taught are good and necessary for life and things like that. And I find in my work, I find that this is a really rich resource for thinking about what it means to encounter queerness itself, to encounter strange things that disrupt our expectations about where fulfillment lies, strange things that sometimes even seem threatening and the church struggles to feel positively about. So to my mind, the real kind of value of queer theology is that a lot of queer people have done the thinking that the church is only just starting to do or needs to start to do. So for me, that's kind of like the real value of queer theology.
Wow. Thanks, Nicolette. And as a couple of you have mentioned, queer theory goes far beyond the bounds of Roman Catholicism and even of Christianity. And queer theology is being done by people from a lot of different religious perspectives, a lot of different Christian perspectives. Is there anything distinctive about Catholic queer theology, about queer theology done by Catholics or for Catholics, for our church? What makes Catholic queer theology an interestingly different or not different case?
Pay attention.
Laurel, do you want to take a stab at that one for me?
You know, I do love this question. I'm not sure that I can say what's particular about Catholicism and know that I'm excluding every other instance of Christian theology, but I think that Catholicism puts a particular emphasis on materiality, on stuff, on sacramentality, on being full of images and colors and diversity and how many saints are there, and and I think that lends itself really well to comparison with queer theory and to queer theology. Because of the importance that queer theology takes in the body and the diversity of experiences that we have in our bodies, and that none of those are the human experience, and then there's these other derivative kinds of human experience, but that everyone's embodied expression of gender and sexuality, among other facets of our human identity, are all fully human. There's connections there to Catholic ecclesiology. Every diocese is fully the church. And so I think Catholicism's sacramentality and stress on material culture really lends itself well to queer reflection.
Thanks, Laurel. Any other thoughts on that, Travis?
No, I echo that. I think that's really well said. And I think another piece I would add is the inherent institutional nature of Catholicism, right? And so I think the theological picture that you just indicated, Laurel, is in some sense the really necessary starting point for a Catholic queer theology, that incarnational approach. It's also the case, I think, perhaps more practically, that a Catholic queer theology is always going to have, if I could put it this way, this problem of the institution to deal with, right? Or at least this relation to try to navigate. And that's a power relation, among other things, right? And so that's going to play out in, the way queer theologians relate to Vatican departments and papal statements and the Synod on synodality. And so there's all these institutional mechanisms and levels of teaching, right, that are at play in the particularly Catholic approach. And I think that in some ways funnels, the energy of a Catholic queer theology in some helpful ways, and in other ways it directs the attention, especially if one is engaged in what I was calling before that kind of apologetic form of queer theology, where the idea is to make more space than there is in the institution currently for queer experiences, queer lives. So that relationship to the institution is, I think, quite important, because ultimately one goal of a contemporary Catholic queer theology, it seems to me, would have to include a certain amount of institutional reform. Right?
Mm-hmm. Nikki, any thoughts on what's distinctive about a Catholic queer theology?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of pick up on some of the sort of facets of what's been said already. Like, I think, yeah, I agree with Laurel that the kind of sacramental aspect to Catholic faith is really important. I mean, especially for me as like a trans person who's involved in doing theology that's kind of in contact with these things. At the center of our faith, we have this great rite of bodily transformation, and that's incredibly meaningful to me. That being the Eucharist. And
the Catholic faith has this great rite of bodily transformation that is particularly meaningful to the trans Catholic theologians. That's how they're going to do it, guys. That's how they're going to queer the Catholic Church. Let's listen again.
Nikki, any thoughts on what's distinctive about a Catholic queer theology?
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of pick up on some of the sort of facets of what's been said already, like I think, yeah, I agree with Laurel that the kind of sacramental aspect to Catholic faith is really important. I mean, especially for me as like a trans person who's involved in doing theology that's kind of in contact with these things, you know, at the center of our faith, we have this great rite of bodily transformation, and that's incredibly meaningful to me, that being the Eucharist. And again, like the institutional context, it provides a certain kind of difficulty and perhaps tension, which I think can be very productive. You know, if you're constantly bouncing off this difficult belonging in this institution, that can be a very helpful pressure that kind of drives creativity. And also because you're constantly torn between, on the one hand, a feeling of alienation from the church often, and on the other hand, a deep love and commitment to it. That's a very kind of compelling combination that drives you to keep working and keep coming back and keep exploring. And then finally, I think, just to add to everything, Catholicism is a very long, storied and rich tradition, and it's very conscious of the resources that that tradition offers. Maybe more so than some other denominations where a lot of queer theology gets done, I think. And being able to look back at that tradition and reimagine it and reinterpret it and re-engage with it and find all of this richness and these kind of conceptual resources, I think.
So they're going back and looking at the Catholic tradition and they're reimagining and reinterpreting, because queer is anything that is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, and the dominant. And so what this person is saying is that all Catholic traditions are open under queer theology within the Catholic Church. All normal Catholic traditions are open to revisiting and reinterpretation under this ideology. Does everyone understand that? I just want to pause and make sure people understand what we're watching right now, because I know this is a little bit complicated. Also, if you're Catholic or have familiarity with the Catholic Church, please pipe in and let me know if I'm getting this right, because although I grew up in a Catholic family, I was one of the black sheeps in the family, and I was not baptized as Catholic. And so I don't have as much direct experience as some people do. All right, let's listen to that again for shits and giggles.
That's a very kind of compelling combination that drives you to keep working and keep coming back and keep exploring. And then finally, I think, just to add to everything, Catholicism is a very long, storied and rich tradition, and it's very conscious of the resources that that tradition offers. Maybe more so than some other denominations where a lot of queer theology gets done, I think. And
I'm gonna be on in Randy's space tonight at 8 p.m. So I do need to make sure we finish this by 8 p.m. So I mean, if I don't know, like if they want you to speak in the space at 8 p.m., come speak in this if you want to, Yasmin. I would be interested to see how the Groypers are, like how receptive the Groypers are to you, to be honest. I hope they'll be nice to you, because you've always been very supportive of Nick. But I will be in that space at 8 p.m.
Being able to look back at that tradition and reimagine it and reinterpret it and re-engage with it and find all of this richness and these kind of conceptual resources, I think is very helpful, and informs like some quite high level sort of theoretical reflection as well, in a way that's just kind of intellectually helpful.
And Nikki, I'm going to follow up, and I'm going to invite Laurel and Travis to answer the same question. So I think there's a way in which knowing our tradition and knowing the riches of our tradition and bouncing that off, as you said, with queer.
So what you're suggesting is that I should have multiple people watching this video who have no idea what they're talking about or what's going on, so it can be more like Timcast? That's what you're arguing? Listen, I've got a whole chat of people who know what's going on more than anyone that has ever been on Timcast ever. And so I'll rely on my chat to be making comments on it. I'll be making comments on it, but I just don't think modeling ourselves after Timcast and having a show with most people who have no fucking clue, I don't think that's a good idea.
Your theory is exciting and intellectually stimulating. How does that change or affect or help in your life as a Catholic queer person? Like, how does this not just be an intellectual exercise, but I think, like, what I'm hearing, like, good theology, this has also been part of your own questing of trying to have to think through your relationship with God and with everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd want to push back on the idea that anything can be just an intellectual exercise. I mean, for me, I came to faith while studying theology. And so for me, my faith has always been bound up in doing theological reflection. It's really kind of central to it. It's almost probably my central sort of spiritual practice. So it's precisely in giving material for that kind of reflection. It gives me material for my faith more generally, which is really helpful. Also, just sometimes, you want to express something or capture something. And if you have 2,000 odd years of people thinking about in the same sort of broad
Well, I want to hear the end of that sentence.
Eventually you're gonna find something that's helpful and will let you express the thoughts that you're trying to have or clarify your thoughts and feelings.
Thanks, Nikki. And of course, my screen is now freezing, for which I apologize. Laurel or Travis, do you want to chime in maybe a little bit of how does this part of your own life as a Catholic or your own spiritual life?
Yeah, I think Catholicism likes to tell a story that everything is the same all the time, that the tradition is just one tradition and it's been the same forever, and you go to mass in any part of the world and it's the same. And of course, that's not true. And I think what queer theology helps me value more for myself is that diversity doesn't have to be a problem or a challenge. It can be a gift and something that helps us understand reality better, see truth and beauty and goodness in the multifaceted way that it actually exists. So I think queer theology helps me value difference and also value liminal spaces as a place where knowledge comes from. So by liminal space, I mean folks that are pushed to the margins or people who aren't in the center. I came to understand myself as queer in dialogue with people who are on liminal, marginal places for economic reasons or for racial reasons or for gender reasons. And so that mutual understanding in difference still helped me understand myself better and helps me, I think, be a better ally to other people also.
Thanks, Laurel.
I would add at this question, I think, well, so I'm a cradle Catholic, and I had, I think, a very close attachment to the church growing up, and as one does at that age, a rather uncritical approach or attachment to the church. And as I grew up and as I learned about myself, you want to know that your tradition, your church, means something to you, can speak to you. There's a gay priest theologian, James Allison, who I've learned a great deal from, who calls theology a matter of survival for him. Right? And there's something of that I identify with, is that if Catholicism was going to continue to mean anything, it had to be able to speak to this aspect of my identity and my experience in the world. And as Laurel says, of the people who were influencing me and who I was learning from and in community with, right? And I really think this is what led me personally both.
Are they effectively saying that the Catholic Church needs to adapt to them? Am I just making that up? The argument is not that they should want to be part of the Catholic Church with the traditions of the Catholic Church. The argument is that the Catholic Church needs to adapt to them to include more lived experiences within their traditions and to adapt their traditions. Yeah, so that's what they're saying, right? Okay. Let me just listen to that again, if you don't mind. That seems a little backwards to me. I mean, I was never a church goer. There we go.
Had, I think, a very close attachment to the church growing up, and as one does at that age, a rather uncritical approach or attachment to the church. And, you know, as I grew up and as I learned about myself, you want to know that your tradition, your church, means something to you, can speak to you. There's a gay priest theologian, James Allison, who I've learned a great deal from, who calls theology a matter of survival for him. Right? And there's something of that I identify with, is that if Catholicism was going to continue to mean anything, it had to be able to speak to this aspect of my identity and my experience in the world. And
if Catholicism was going to mean anything, it would have to be able to speak to my experience in the world. Again, that just seems backwards to me. It seems like they're trying to frame like an entire religion with 2,000 years of history, like, and they're demanding this religion adapt to them if it's going to have any meaning for them.
as Laurel says, of the people who were influencing me and who I was learning from and in community with, right? And I really think this is what led me personally, both what led me deeper into the study of queer theology, but what also I find, you know, a great source of comfort or solace in it is that it is a way of entering into the church's own dialogue in a way.
I wonder how many queer theologians are currently within like the Catholic Church. Like, I don't know how this works, so I wonder how many like Catholic queer theologians there currently are in the world.
On the church's own terms, if by that we mean having the same conversation that theology has tried to have over its long history. And, you know, I think it's sometimes as simple as that. We need to be able to see a form of speech, a version of the discourse that resonates, because I really think all theology that matters has to come from that first person perspective. And this is the first person's perspective that I bring to my theology, right? Yeah. So it's a question of the credibility, right, and the coherence of theological speech as such. Because if God wants to know us as thinking, embodied creatures, then we can't be entering into that dialogue, you know, hiding important parts of who we are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's well said. I want to remind everyone who's listening that there is that Q&A function where you can add questions if this is sparking a reaction, a comment, something you want to know more about. Feel free to chime in and use that so I can bring some of those questions into our conversation. And one thing I can imagine that some of our listeners, some of our viewers are thinking is, okay, this sounds great that these professors are doing their theology and they're writing about this stuff. What does it do for me? What does it do in a church where we have lots of anti-LGBTQ policies, especially most recently, lots of anti-trans activity, statements from the Vatican about trans people and their lives that are not based on what we know from our trans friends' experiences? What good does doing queer theology, doing this very theoretical in some ways activity, do for the church as a whole, do for some organization like New Ways Ministries works for LGBTQ justice, and some of the people on our call who are doing that in their own ways in parishes and institutions and in dioceses? Anyone want to jump us off on that one of what difference does all this make? Laurel, go ahead.
I mean, one thing that I'll just say to start us off maybe is that theology is such a small piece of the pie. Theology is not like the top version of activism. Theology at best can like contribute something small to our different activist movements. And I don't think that any of us on this panel excuse ourselves from activist.
Hang on, we got a question from Tom. Carlin, I have to blame you for me spending last Saturday watching all 4 of your Evergreen State streams. Are you planning on finishing that series? Yeah, I would like to finish it. I mean, I think we still got a ways to go. I think we're only about halfway through it. But yeah, I would like to finish it at some point. Oh wow, Stacy is from Big Tech's chat. So Big Tech is now sending people over here to disrupt my stream because he has no fucking life and no content of his own. Carlin, you present yourself like you survived much online harassment. Why all of a sudden are you not able to take a joke? Because it's not a fucking joke. Have others made you prejudice on Big Tech? No, the person who made me prejudice on big tech is big tech himself. And Stacy, if you guys would like a little primer about the amount of bullshit that I had to endure over the course of fucking years, you guys and big tech are welcome to avail yourself of the literal book length fucking Substack that I wrote about this, called survivingcarriesmith.substack.com, in which I documented thousands of screenshots of the online harassment that I got over the course of years. If big tech thinks that he has had the worst experience online ever, what he experienced online is about this fucking big compared to what I had to experience online. And yet he still cries and cries and cries and cries and cries about it all the fucking time. At some point, you got to move on. I documented every bit of my experience in detail on this Substack with primary source receipts, motherfucker. And so if you guys don't believe that, you can go over there and look. And I do not find it to be a fucking joke. Back to things that matter far more than assholes on the internet.
Or apologetic work, just because we're also thinking about this sometimes, right? So I consider myself to be a companion of different activist, maybe is a word, or inclusion efforts in church spaces or in society in general. My hope is that work in queer theology can inspire and encourage that kind of work, or can kind of help at the end summarize or document what's happening. And there's some questions here about like how to incorporate this in high school.
Yes, in fact, there were harassment reports filed on Carrie in Texas, which is where Carrie lives, and on Mike Harlow, and on the Queen from England, who, like, I actually had to file harassment reports in multiple fucking countries. There were fucking lawyers involved, all this bullshit. So yeah. Now, I would like to move on and listen to the rest of this. Yeah, Bob, can you DM me that? I would appreciate it.
In like a sacraments or liturgy class. And I don't know that undergraduate teaching is that different than high school teaching. And one way in, I think, is some of the themes of queer theology that we've already touched on.
Yes, I did. I did hear rumor that big tech decided to play a video of me that was basically after the worst fucking year of my life, in which I was carrying a lot more weight than I'm carrying now, and decided to make fun of my weight. I really do. I did see that. I did see that. That was you know, he definitely looked like a winner on the internet when he did that. Definitely someone that wants to be associated with. Definitely someone that, you know, I did see that. Yeah, I don't actually believe that. So.
Embodiment, diversity in the tradition, anytime that we can upend students' assumptions or show them that Catholic liturgy doesn't always look like X, Y, and Z, or sacraments were celebrated in all of these crazy different ways for so long. Anytime we can kind of break open and multiply the ways that we understand the word Catholic or what the tradition means, I think that's helpful, fruitful, like tilling of the mind ground for students to later be able to talk about queer theory and queer theology too.
I also think it's important to remember that although we want to change the world and we need to change the church, we're also called to be more than activists. You know, you were created to contemplate the mysteries of the divine and to have a spiritual relationship with God. And queer theology can be a way of doing this. You know, you learn about yourself and you learn about God in relation to you. And it can be...
Stacy, why don't you relay to big tech that if he doesn't cut the shit, I am absolutely going to reveal what he told me on that 4 a.m. phone call, and I don't think he's going to like it. So he might claim that he doesn't remember what was on that 4 a.m. phone call, but I absolutely remember what was on that 4 a.m. phone call. And he might make the argument, there's no proof, there's no proof, there's no proof, there's no proof, there's no proof. I didn't record it or anything because it was my impression that it was just like a phone call. It was like among people who actually had some amount of respect for each other. But since that situation has changed, and since big tech wants to play this fucking game, let him play the fucking game. He wants to keep up the shit. I will absolutely tell everyone the deep, dark secret that he doesn't want people to know.
Be very enriching. And I think, in fact, one of the real strengths of queer theology as well is that in taking your queerness as like the kind of center of its reflection, it moves beyond this attempt to constantly justify yourself to something, to, you know, a standard that might be imposed on you from outside, a standard that maybe you can never live up to. It gives you the freedom to you know, just think about your life on its own terms and think about God in the terms that perhaps are the most meaningful to you. Someone in the chat mentioned how you might be able to queer theology of the body, and I don't have an answer to that, but I mean, one of the strengths of queer theology is precisely that you can put theology of the body down and think about these things in another way as well. And I think that that's incredibly important, especially when we're constantly called to account for ourselves and justify ourselves to people in power.
And Nikki, I want to ask.
And I'll go on Politically Provoked to do it. He really wants to play this fucking game. I will go and talk to Brittany and Mio, and I will reveal his big fucking secret on Politically Provoked.
You to say a little bit more there, because I think one of the things we're hearing too is some questions about, okay, this all sounds great, but what concretely difference might queer theory and queer theology make? So let's take a more concrete example. How do we think about God differently, or how might some people think about God differently from the perspectives that we get from some queer theologians?
I mean, I can jump in on this one. Maybe.
Yeah, I was actually, Nick, I'm going to hope you could jump in on this one.
Okay, cool. Sure. Yeah. So one big thing that you get in Catholicism, people see divine stuff as kind of underpinning or confirming or making necessary the things we encounter in the world around us. So in the medieval period, for example, people saw God as at the very top of a hierarchy and creating the world with like a kind of descending hierarchy. It was known as the great chain of being. So the kind of social structures that you'd find in the world would be an expression of God's nature. God would create this hierarchical world where there are kings above you, and then they make everyone's society coordinate in order to bring everyone up to find their fulfillment in God, things like that. So you had God kind of underpinning this whole sort of social structure. Queer theology takes issue with this kind of thing because it maybe looks at how the divine can be thought of in ways that unsettle these sorts of hierarchies.
Hang on. We're going to go back and listen to this again. But what she just said is that under queer theology, God is no longer the head of the church. Let's listen again. Remember, the goal of queer is to upend anything that is considered to be normal or traditional.
God as at the very top.
Hang on.
Think about God differently, or how might some people think about God differently from the perspectives that we get from some queer theologians?
All right. It's just going to be one of those days. You're absolutely correct that I'm the expert on my stream. You are absolutely correct that most people do not have the expertise I do. You are absolutely correct. God damn it. What the fuck? Seriously? Seriously. We are literally watching a presentation right now about how they're going to queer theology in the Catholic Church, and no one's paying fucking attention to the presentation. And this person is saying, you're just mad when other people know more than you. Well, no, other people don't know more than me, motherfucker. They don't. And until you've sat here for 3.5 years, almost every single day, and you've watched these people almost for hours a day, almost every single day, you don't get to claim you're the expert in something that you don't have as much experience in as I do. So you are absolutely correct that the vast majority of people in the world are less expert in this than I am. So What they are about to explain is that the goal of queer theology is to upend God as the head of the Catholic Church. And if you don't like what I'm teaching, go watch something else.
I mean, I can jump in on this one. Maybe.
Yeah, I was actually, Nick, I'm going to hope you could jump in on this one.
Okay, cool. Sure. So, one big thing that you get in Catholicism, people see divine stuff as kind of underpinning or confirming or making necessary the things we encounter in the world around us. So in the medieval period, for example, people saw God as at the very top of a hierarchy and creating the world with like a kind of descending hierarchy, it was known as the great chain of being. So the kind of social structures that you find in the world would be an expression of God's nature. God would create this hierarchical world where there are kings above you, and then they make everyone's society coordinate in order to bring everyone up to find their fulfillment in God, things like that. So you had God kind of underpinning this whole sort of social structure. Queer theology takes issue with this kind of thing because it maybe looks at how the divine can be thought of in ways that unsettle these sorts of hierarchies. Or
socialists, the far left, they hate hierarchies. That's what equity is. Equity is getting rid of all hierarchies. That means that no one has more than everyone else. Everyone is at the same level. Everyone is equally rich. Everyone is equally poor. Everyone has equal access to the same food, except if you're in the inner circle, and then you probably get more food and better food and all that stuff.
These sorts of conventions for organizing society and governing our relationships with one another. So yeah, I mean, that's like a kind of concrete example. It allows God to become a source of unsettling in our lives, and that can be something that's very fruitful and productive for us.
God is a source of unsettling hierarchies in our lives. I want to go back and get a clip of this, guys. Hang on, bear with me. This one actually seems important. Everyone pray that my clipping tool actually works today. Let's see. Will it work? Will it work? I hope Big Tech's audience is learning something instead of just fucking around on the internet for once.
People think about God. Let's take this. I ask you to say a little bit more there, because I think one of the things we're hearing too is some questions about, okay, this all sounds great, but what concretely difference might queer theory and queer theology make? So let's take a more concrete example. How do we think about God differently, or how might some people think about God differently from the perspectives that we get from some queer theologians?
I mean, I can jump in on this one. Maybe.
Yeah, I was actually, Nick, I'm going to hope you could jump in on this one.
Okay, cool. Sure. So, one big thing that you get in Catholicism, people see divine stuff as kind of underpinning or confirming or making necessary the things we encounter in the world around us. So in the medieval period, for example, people saw God as at the very top of a hierarchy and creating the world with like a kind of descending hierarchy. It was known as the great chain of being. So the kind of social structures that you find in the world would be an expression of God's nature. God would create this hierarchical world where there are kings above you, and then they make everyone's society coordinate in order to bring everyone up to find their fulfillment in God, things like that. So you had God kind of underpinning this whole sort of social structure. Queer theology takes issue with this kind of thing because it maybe looks at how the divine can be thought of in ways that unsettle these sorts of hierarchies or these sorts of conventions for organizing society and governing our relationships with one another. So yeah, I mean, that's like a kind of concrete example. It allows God to become a source of unsettling in our lives, and that can be something that's very fruitful and productive for us, even as it seems threatening and destructive and disruptive in other ways.
All right,
Trevor,
hang on, let me get my clip, make sure that recorded. Thank you guys for allowing me to do that. I appreciate it. I'm going to create a new document. There it is. Everything worked great. Let's keep going.
So Laurel, would you be able to give us other examples of where queer theology makes a difference in how we think about God, or think about church, or think about Jesus?
Well, one, I think, encapsulation that I've found helpful in classrooms.
Actually, this is kind of funny. So saying Christ is king is under queer theology, saying Christ is king is considered to be transphobic violence. Like this is about to become another feature for the Groypers. This is like a feature for the Groypers, not a bug. Groypers can both advocate for Christ being king at the same time as they're advocating for transphobic violence. That's hilarious. Thank you for that. I needed some levity.
And also I think is a good example of sort of a classic queer theology move is Miguel de la Torre's book, and arguments in that book, A Lily Among the Thorns. We have this, he looks at the biblical story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Classically sort of held up as an example of a biblical basis for anti-homosexual teaching, right? Because it was contended for a long time, more or less formal levels of theological teaching, that the sin of Sodom was homosexuality, right? That what God saw in Sodom was homosexual activity, and this is why God needed to destroy the cities. And De La Torre looks at this and says, you know, through careful rereading of scripture and the texts and the reception history, that an argument can very well be made. In fact, a stronger argument can be made that the offensive sin of Sodom was a lack of hospitality to the stranger, right? So the angels come to Sodom under the guise of humans, and they are turned away, right? And this is what incurs God's wrath. Now, look, this is using biblical stories in a very particular way to feed into different kinds of theological argument, but it's kind of a lot of instances of what we've been talking about, right? Rereading, creative, tension-filled re-renderings of traditional theological material. And what this leads to is a challenge to the institutional church that then presents its teaching as founded on these supposedly immovable and ancient materials, right? And so queer theology is always going to look at those materials and say, well, what do they actually say, right? What lessons can we actually draw from them? And therefore, you know, how might we go about talking about one another, structuring our institution, and indeed clarifying the basic, you know, tenets of Christian faith? And this is a bit of.
But I just want to say the Fruit Loop slime is definitely the best slime. Like this is like my favorite slime by far.
Queer theology in microcosm, right? And it matters, I think, to your previous question there, Brian, about what can it do, right? Because this is why I say it's speaking in the language, the church's own language. Because if the church is going to put forward these theological arguments as justification for treatment of a certain sort of group of people, well, then the counter argument needs to be made in that language, right? So this is the basis, at least, for the arguments that then become tenable.
Wait, is there a queer Marxist Bible yet? Can someone just look up queer Bible and see if I know there are queer tarot cards. Someone sent me the queer tarot cards the other day. I sent them to Joshua. He was very unimpressed.
Right, in a Catholic context.
Yeah, and it strikes me that there's, I mean, I've heard before the idea that good theology is a lot like good engineering. You only notice it when it's missing, right? And that this theological work of saying, going back to scripture with a queer perspective, going back to the teachings of the church or the history of tradition with an idea, okay, where did we miss something because we were too close to what might be subversive, challenging, different about it? That might answer some of our viewers or questions about, well, how does this, what difference does this make in our lives? Well, it allows our perspective, perhaps, as queer Christians, to say
queerbible.com. I would say there's a website for it. Holy shit, bot. Let's see. Yo, check this out. Look at this. Look at this. The Queer Bible. Your guide to queer culture and history. Enter. They've got a Twitter at Queer Bible on Twitter. Are they actually active? Kind of active. Oh, are they in the UK? I don't like UK stuff as much as American stuff, but that's all right. Elton John. "20 essays celebrating." Oh, so it's not like, this is not, hang on. This isn't like the Bible. This isn't like the religious Bible. This is like a bunch of essays written by like quote unquote queer celebrities. So good effort, bot. Not exactly what I was looking for. That's all right.
Not just accept us, but also we bring a new set of lenses to this whole tradition that allow us to ask new questions, and in doing that, maybe learn something new about God, learn something new about our scriptures, learn something new about our tradition. Laura, did you have any concrete examples, or do you want me to move to another question? What are you thinking?
The one I was thinking of is this insight coming from queer theology, and I'm thinking of if you have.
Well, you guys can think whatever you want. I don't really care. I have like literally never bashed Nick. So if you want to provide me with some evidence of that, go right ahead. But if you're just going to cause problems in my chat, I'm just going to block you. I don't really care. I'm not going to defend this. So. Oh, Big Tech just called me a nasty fat pig with an annoying laugh. Oh, that's really nice of him. That's really, really nice. Gee, I can't imagine why his wife divorced him and married a Filipino. I just can't imagine why that happened. I just cannot imagine. I just cannot imagine why that happened.
Have access to the journal Concilium. There was a number of Concilium in 2021, I want to say, on queer theology. And it's a lot of short, some very accessible essays on contemporary perspectives on queer theology. So I'll recommend that as a resource if folks are interested. But there's an essay in there by, I think, Carmen Margarita Sanchez de Leon, who is a Puerto Rican, Mexican, lesbian priest of the Metropolitan Community Church with many strong Catholic roots. And she talks about how many bodies.
I think it's really stunning and brave of Big Tech to basically turn into potato. It's basically what's happened. Big Tech has turned into potato. You know, it was an interesting choice for him. He could have gone a way more productive way, but no, he decided to turn into potato. So now I'm going to block him on Discord and I'm going to block him on Twitter, and that's just going to be the end of it.
Bodies Jesus has, right? So Jesus is born as a baby in a manger, and then in the transfiguration, Jesus's body changes somehow, and then in the resurrection, Jesus's body changes somehow, and then after the ascension, Jesus's body is now the church, which is actually many bodies of all gender expression. And so thinking about like, what is the body of Christ? What is this body that Christians ascribe divinity to? It's multiple, it's changing, it reflects Jesus's own work and ministry. The queer perspective on Jesus's body in all of its different manifestations in our history has been a fruitful place for the reflection of queer theology also.
Thanks, Laura. And Laurel, you started talking about this issue of concilium, but another question we're getting, and I think is really important, is if people want to know more about this, especially in ways that this is accessible for the non-theologian or accessible for folks who are trying to think this through, who want to both hold.
Hey, Mark, you just had lunch with me the other day. I wonder, since Mark has actually seen me in person like relatively recently, I would just like Mark to provide an assessment of what did Big Tech say about me? What did he say? Mark, in your meeting with me just the other day, would you classify me as a nasty fat pig? Would you agree? I'm just curious. Not that I want to put you on the spot, Mark. If you would actually classify me as a nasty fat pig based on your lunch meeting with me just the other day in person in Detroit, you know, you can go ahead and say it. I won't be mad or anything. But I'm just wondering if someone who has actually seen me in person, which Big Tech has not, I'm just wondering about like an independent assessment of that. Let's see, from someone who has actually seen me in person. Absolutely not. Carlin, me, and my wife are both watching, and you are beautiful and skinny. She's literally tiny. I don't want to say I'm tiny. I'm certainly tinier than I was in the video that Big Tech chose to show on his channel the other day. But funny how it works out that people who've actually seen me in person don't actually have the same impression, but okay. Okay.
Hold on to how do we better understand moral teaching? How do we better understand sort of the basics? But if we want to go further into where are queer theologians helping to develop
yes, please.
our thinking
Yes, I
together
do.
as a church,
Yeah.
where are some places or
Yeah.
some books or some authors that they might start, or some videos?
Thank you,
if you want to
Mark.
be very
I
modern?
appreciate that.
I'll offer Patrick Cheng as a name. He serves as an Episcopal priest and studied at Union Theological Seminary with James Cone, if you're familiar with the tradition of liberation theology, and has several books coming kind of from this.
I was even wearing like skin tight clothes when I saw Mark. I mean, I was wearing like leggings. I was wearing this shirt and leggings. Like, it's not like I was hiding anything.
Queer theology perspective. One is called Rainbow Theology and thinks about queer identities and racial identities and the overlap of like ethnic groups and queer identity and what that looks like. So I'll recommend Patrick Cheng.
Yeah, I think it's an abundance of riches, but some touchstones for me. I mentioned James Allison. I really do think that's a wonderful source and geared. I mean, he writes the academic theology, but there's a lot of more popular stuff that you can find.
All he has.
Sermons and
all
short
he
pieces
has.
and things like that.
That's it.
Marcella Althaus-Reed is a name we should mention, who really kicks off academic queer theology in a real way with a book in 2000, the Indecent Theology. Marcella Althaus-Reed has sadly passed, so I saw someone in the questions asking if there's a queer theologian whom we can ask for intercession, and I would make a habit of praying to Marcella whenever you can. But I think a very good treatment there. And Mark Jordan, Mark D. Jordan is an excellent source. Again, this is kind of classic stuff in the field, but history of Catholicism and homosexuality. I think one of the exciting things about queer theology is that even the academic sources often do seem quite accessible and sometimes relevant to the sort of more boots on the ground questions that people may have. So I would say people like James Allison, Lynn Marie Tonstad at Yale has a, I think, very good sort of primer named Queer Theology, short little book that's geared towards undergraduates.
See, this is my lesson to never see. We're not even watching the presentation at this point. We're just talking to him, which is exactly what he wanted. He wanted to completely disrupt this fucking presentation because this is what people like him do, because they aren't doing anything of value in the world. They aren't teaching their audience anything. They aren't trying to create anything. They aren't trying to do anything real. They're just trying to be disruptive because they hate themselves and they think they're a piece of shit and they have no self-esteem. And they can pretend they do by posturing on the internet and talking about their giant cock and all that. They can pretend they have self-esteem, but at the end of the day, you can tell if people actually have self-esteem based on what they contribute to the world. And if they aren't contributing anything productive to the world and they're contributing she's just a fat, nasty pig, and making up lies to make it seem like something was going on that wasn't going on, and all of this stuff. Well, I actually wrote about this in my book, Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I wrote about the fact that there are creators and destroyers, and the people who are most woke are the people who lack the self-esteem to believe that they can create anything of value in the world. And that's why they have to destroy things, because they don't have self-esteem. And that is one of the things that leads to them being woke in the first place, because that is where they get their sense of purpose from. Their purpose is literally destruction, because they don't feel that they have anything valuable to offer the world other than that. So this is why we don't help people on the internet. This is why, even when you run across people who are telling a sad, sad, sad story of how badly they've been canceled on the internet, and how what a raw deal they got, and all this stuff, and you still don't try to help them, because those people, because they're whining and complaining all the time on the internet instead of doing something productive with their days, those people are never going to accept the help, because they don't feel worthy of receiving the help. So this is why we never help people on the internet.
But that anyone can pick up. So there's a lot of resources, and maybe we can put that. I'll put that in the chat or something towards the end. I don't know.
Yeah. Nikki, any favorites?
Yeah, so I mean, I was going to mention Lynn Tonstad's Queer Theology. It's a really great introduction, and I think really helps frame queer theology in terms of what makes it important to your spiritual life as a queer person. I also really like a collection edited by Nicholas Panotto called Indecent Theologians, which builds on the work of Marcella Aushaus-Reed in a very accessible way, and a way that really brings queer theology into contact with kind of post-colonial theology, and shows how it interfaces with a lot of kind of other issues in the world. I mean, if Aushaus-Reed is one of the kind of founding figures of queer theology, she's working in an explicitly kind of post-colonial way. So that kind of post-colonial stuff is really important for queer theology, and has been there since its inception. And Indecent Theologians kind of continues to explore this.
You all missed one very obvious source, which is Bondings 2.0, the blog of New Ways Ministry, which many of you have subscribed to. That we, if you've been reading recently,
Thank
so
you.
Laurel
I
had an essay
appreciate it.
today, review summarizing a book from Latin America, written in Spanish, about Mysterium Liberationis Queer. We're trying to bring some of these voices in. We have for decades now, of folks who are on kind of the front lines, and also asking, how can we as theologians like myself and my colleagues here, but how can we as New Ways Ministry, as a place that's trying to educate, keep bringing these voices to other people. And so tonight was one small exercise in that. I'm excited that so many people have stuck around. I'm going to turn it over in a moment to my colleague Bob Shine to tell you some more of what New Ways Ministry is up to, including some possible more resources for learning more about queer theology for those who are interested. But I can't stop by without thanking our three panelists tonight for sharing their wisdom, but also sharing some more of themselves. Right, part of the joy of queer theology is vulnerability, is being in public and being there as a whole body and a whole person in the way one does one's theology. So thank you for sharing not just your thoughts tonight, but for being here, for your presence, for your wisdom, for your persons. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bob Shine, who has a couple of small, quick announcements.
All right. I think we may have finished it out, because I don't care about hearing their announcements. I mean, it's too bad that we were so distracted with nonsense to actually listen to the main presentation, but I do think we got some good clips out of it in terms of them talking about basically perverting the Eucharist, which kind of seems to be a big deal to me. And also the one about how they are trying to remove God as the head of the Catholic Church. So that was another good clip that we got. Does anyone else have anything that they learned tonight that they want to share in the chat? Let's see if we can make something of this stream and maybe share some stuff that we learned, if we learned anything beyond internet drama and bullshit. I know, Bot, I saw there was a new slime drop. We're gonna have to take a look at that. Yeah, this is definitely not fake drama. I just blocked him on Discord and Twitter, and I sincerely hope to never hear from him again. So this is definitely, listen, like, people can think whatever they want. The fact is that I've always been supportive of Nick. If the thing that they have to point to is that I called Nick gay 3 years ago, after weeks of the Groypers giving me shit 3 years ago, something that I've already actually disavowed and said, you know what, I probably shouldn't have done that. You know, you can't help people, man, and that's just the way it goes. So, but I appreciate meeting you. I hope you had a good time. Let's see. Sacrifice their bodies for their faith equals transition and transformation. Yeah, that was a big one. That's something we've heard queer Marxists talk about before. Saying Christ is King is transphobic. Well, that wasn't from the presentation. We just kind of made that up. Yeah, apparently saying Christ is King is transphobic because it puts Christ at the head of the church, which is a hierarchy. They want to make the church collective. Yep. I'm not going to cry, Jerry. Don't worry about it. I haven't even tried to get into group chats. So again, like, I don't even know what to say. I don't really care about being in group chats, so whatever. You can't stop people from making stuff up. It's kind of like one of those things where it's just like, it's useless to kind of worry about it because you just can't stop people from doing what they're going to do. All right. Yep, big tech is still trying to create a rift between me and the Groypers because he's pissed off that I had a good time with the Groypers and they liked me. And it is what it is, you know? Nothing I can do about it. I obviously can't stop him from being an asshole on the internet. I can't stop the Groypers from believing whatever they want to believe. The only thing I can do is just do what I'm doing, and that's all that I really care about. Well, they want to co-opt the Catholic Church just like they want to co-opt all churches, and use it for their purposes. So the goal of queer Marxists within religion, it's not to destroy religion. They're not trying to destroy it at all. What they're trying to do is co-opt it and to use it for their own purposes. Are Groypers against this gay Catholicism? Well, I would hope so. I mean, I'm not going to speak on the Ali thing. I think that that's kind of been settled and everyone should move on from it, but I would think that they're probably against it. Yeah, that's generally the impression that I've gotten. And I kind of think that people in the chat that are like pretending, like that are saying things, I kind of think that they're not really like involved, to be honest. I think they're just being trolls. Because the Groypers are smart and they know that big tech is a lying asshole. Said, I'm overweight with a turkey neck. My voice is like nails on a chalkboard and my ego is super overinflated. He said he didn't want to tell me because it would hurt my feelings. Well, you know, everyone's allowed to have an opinion. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone is allowed to have them, aren't they? No. Now I know you're making shit up, bro. No, that's not true at all. I would never do shrooms at an event. That's just dumb, man. That is dumb, 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 dumb. Don't ever do that. Do shrooms in a nice, comfortable place, preferably your home, where you can relax, where you're safe, where you know everything that's going on, where you have like a controlled space. Don't go to fucking Detroit and do shrooms at an event. That is one of the stupidest things that's ever happened. Well, the other queer insurrection theologian I was listening to definitely wants to destroy the church. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, how do you mean, though? Are they trying to destroy the church, or are they trying to co-opt the church for their own purposes? Yeah, that's a really good question. Big tech thinks that my voice is like nails on a chalkboard, then why did big tech talk to me for 4 fucking hours? Up and like starting at midnight, ending at 4 a.m. That's a great question. That's a great question. If that's really true, and it's not just something he's saying on the internet, then why did that happen? I mean, if I had to talk to someone for 4 hours that I found to just be incredibly annoying and I wanted nothing to do with, like, I mean, I probably, like, no one is obligated to talk to someone for 4 hours starting at midnight, especially if they think their voice is like nails on a chalkboard. It's a great question. Thank you, Kazmar, for the super sticker. I appreciate you. Let's see. What else do we have? We've got Sin. I think you are great. Screw Big Tech. I still want to use Bot's nickname for him, please. I mean, listen, man, I told you guys to leave him alone. I told you guys not to go after him. I no longer care. Do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to say that I just don't care anymore. Would I fight Big Tech in a cage match if Beardson was my partner? No. No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. Let's see. Well, that's honestly kind of like what I was thinking. Like, that's honestly kind of what I was thinking. It's kind of like, if you really have to brag about it that much, like, kind of, I don't know. And the only reason I was even interested in that is to actually see if he was telling the truth. But I guess we'll never know, which is fine. Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate you. Yeah, he stream sniped the whole thing. Yeah, he did. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Because he has nothing else he can do. No other content he can, like this is like one of the most boring things in the world to stream snipe. Could be doing so many other interesting things right now. But no, just has to be disruptive. So he can continue talking about me on the internet, because he can't talk to me anymore. I've now blocked him on Discord. I've now blocked him on Twitter. I suppose he could try to figure out other ways to get in touch with me, but can't talk to me anymore. So now he just has to talk about me. Did Big Tech contact you first about the Groypers? Yes, he did. I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who he was. He contacted me after I talked to Beardson that first time. I had no idea who he was. I mean, I fucking love my late night selfies. I look good in my late night selfies. And he liked my late night selfies too, if he's honest about it. And so, whatever. Like, I'm allowed to do whatever I want. I'm an adult on the internet. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I ended up using a lot of those selfies for thumbnails. Anyway, I think that's all we have. Did I hit all the super chats? Just want to make sure. I did. All right. So it is 7:20 now. At 8 p.m. I will be on Randy. I will be doing a Twitter space with Randy, who is a Groyper. I will tweet that out. So if you guys want to come and join the Twitter space with me, that's cool. And I'm not going to talk about big tech anymore. He can keep whining and crying all the tears that he wants. The only reason I even talked about him today is he caused another fucking problem for me with his bullshit that I wanted to address and I wanted people to know about. And, you know, he can go fade off into irrelevance, just like all of the other people who have done this to me in the past. And I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing. But I will be back tomorrow night for Socialism Saturday at 6 p.m. And I will see you guys all then. And I'll see you on the Twitter space in a little bit. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.